Takeshima is the inherent territory of Japan, and the San Francisco Peace Treaty reconfirmed its status as Japanese territory. Regardless of these facts, in the 1950s, the Republic of Korea occupied these islands. Japan suggested that the issue of territorial rights to Takeshima be referred to the International Court of Justice, but the Republic of Korea did not accept the proposal. The Korean government then asserted unilateral claims to sovereignty over Takeshima. One of these claims is related to Ahn Yong-bok. Ahn Yong-bok is portrayed as a hero who claimed to Japan that Takeshima is Korean territory and made Japan accept this demand. He even has a stone monument in his honor on Utsuryo Island. What exactly is this all about? And is the claim valid? As a result of negotiations between Japan and Korea, in January 1696, the Edo shogunate prohibited passage to Utsuryo Island by the Oya and Murakawa families. However, in May of that year, Ahn Yong-bok, who had been taken to Japan several years prior, reappeared in Japan. It was in the Oki Islands where Ahn Yong-bok appeared. The story begins here. On May 20th, 1696, in the old lunisolar calendar, Ahn Yong-bok and 10 other people arrived in the islands and were questioned by officials of the magistrate's office. Ahn Yong-bok said he had come to lodge a protest with Tottori Domain, and he stayed at a home arranged by the magistrate to write out the complaint. Ahn Yong-bok then headed to Tottori Domain. On June 4th, he arrived in Akasaki in present-day Tottori Prefecture. After that, he was detained and questioned by Tottori Domain. Tottori Domain requested instructions from the shogunate on how to deal with him, but in the end, Ahn Yong-bok's protest was not taken up, and by order of the shogunate, he was expelled from Tottori Domain. After they had been back to Korea, Ahn Yong-bok and his party were arrested in Yangyang, Gangwon Province, by the province's top official. Here, Ahn Yong-bok explained to a Korean magistrate that he had lodged a protest in Japan. This was then reported to Korea's central government. The central government ordered that Ahn Yong-bok and his party be sent to the capital, where he was questioned by the Border Defense Council. Ahn Yong-bok was interrogated by the Border Defense Council. His statements were recorded in the Annals of King Sukjong, a Korean historical document that was compiled later. One of the Republic of Korea's claim to sovereignty over Takeshima is based on statements by Ahn Yong-bok, in particular those he made during questioning at the Border Defense Council. He stated at the council his assertion in the questioning in the Oki Islands that Utsuryo Island and Jasando belonged to Korea's Gangwon Province. The Republic of Korea claims that this Jasando is present-day Takeshima. There exist Japanese documents recording the questioning in the Oki Islands. They are historical records passed on in the Murakami family of Oki. They are so scrupulous that they can be considered transcripts of the questioning that began with Ahn Yong-bok's arrival in Oki on May 20th. These documents state that Ahn Yong-bok said the following to an official of the magistrate's office. I came to Japan to lodge a protest with Tottori Domain, but I stopped by this port due to an unfavorable wind. When the wind turns favorable, I intend to cross the sea to Hoki Province. Utsuryo Island and Jasando are in Korea's Gangwon Province. The Japanese call them Takeshima and Matsushima, respectively. I possess the map of the 8 provinces of Korea depicting the islands. The Republic of Korea claims that this Jasando refers to present-day Takeshima. Is this true? Jasando is a misspelling of Usando. Certainly, old Korean documents and maps refer to Usando near Utsuryo Island. The Republic of Korea claims that this Usando refers to Takeshima and that therefore Takeshima has long been Korean territory. However, the revised and augmented edition of the Survey of the Geography of Korea contains two traditional maps of Korea, the map of the 8 provinces of Korea and the map of Gangwon Province, that show Usando between the Korean peninsula and Utsuryo Island in the west of Utsuryo Island. The Usan in Usando is an old name for Utsuryo Island, and it does not refer to Takeshima. Beginning in the 15th century, nobody lived on Utsuryo Island due to Korea's empty island policy. The Korean government at the time was not even aware of Takeshima, which is located 88 kilometers southeast of Utsuryo Island. Ahn Yong-bok heard about Matsushima while he was in Japan in 1693, and he simply guessed that it referred to Usando on his maps of Korea. There is an 18th century Korean map that labels a small island just east of Utsuryo Island as Usando. Beginning in the 18th century, Korea began patrolling Utsuryo Island once every few years, and the Koreans simply thought that the small island of Chukdo next to Utsuryo Island was actually Usando. Now let's look at Ahn's statements at the Border Defense Council. His statements are recorded in the Annals of King Suk-jong, the text compiled after the king's death to record the events that occurred during his reign. The Annals of King Suk-jong also mentions that during the questioning in Oki, Ahn Yong-bok claimed that Utsuryo Island and Jasando are islands that belong to Korea's Gangwon Province, but let us examine another aspect of his statements. His statements significantly differ from his explanation during the questioning in the Oki Islands. First of all, he accused the Japanese fishermen on Utsuryo Island of violating the border in May 1696. According to the record, the Japanese fishermen said that they lived on Matsushima, had come to catch fish, and were just about to go back. Therefore, Ahn said, Matsushima is synonymous with Jasando and it is Korean territory, so how would you be able to live on Matsushima? His party sailed to Jasando the next day, and they found on the island that Japanese were boiling fish oil in a cauldron, so the Koreans smashed it into pieces and scolded the Japanese, who then left. While chasing them, his party encountered strong winds that set them adrift toward the Oki Islands. In Oki, Ahn said, 3 years ago, Utsuryo Island and Jasando were designated as Korean territory, and the shogun produced a note to that effect. Even so, there are border violations, and I asked the Lord of Oki to inform Hoki Province, but since there was no reply, I headed for Hoki Province, or more specifically, to Tottori Domain. According to the records, in Tottori Domain, he presented himself as a tax overseer for Utsuryo Island and Jasando, and said that he had met the Lord of Tottori Domain, who promised that anyone violating the border would be severely punished. We will now compare his explanations in Oki and his actual actions on one side with his statements provided to the Border Defense Council on the other. According to the records of Ahn's statements in the Annals of King Suk-jong, he had met the Lord of Tottori Domain, and he presented himself as a tax overseer for Utsuryo Island and Jasando. Japanese documents also record that he presented the same title, but he did not have the opportunity to meet the domain's lord. Also, Ahn stated that he received a note from the shogun when he was in Japan in 1693. So he gave the council various false statements. Ahn mistakenly thought that Jasando on Korean maps was the same as Matsushima, which is present-day Takeshima, and the result is that his statement that Jasando is called Matsushima in Japanese was recorded in the annals of King Sukjong. The false statements of Ahn recorded in the annals of King Sukjong were then entered as if they were objective facts in Korean geography and history books that came later. Based on these erroneous geography and history books, the Republic of Korea claims that Usando refers to present-day Takeshima. As noted, both the annals of King Sukjong and Japanese documents record that, in Oki, Ahn stated that Utsuryo Island and Jasando were in Gangwon Province. The Republic of Korea makes a far-fetched argument that this single common mention in both texts proves all Ahn statements at the council. Thus, the Korean claim that is premised on the accuracy of Ahn Yong-bok's statements to the Border Defense Council fundamentally does not hold up. Furthermore, elsewhere there are significant errors in Korean claims that rely on Ahn Yong-bok's statements. They are clearly written in the annals of King Sukjong that the Korean side relies upon, inquiring into Ahn's actions. Tsushima Domain asked Korea, "Last year, a person from your country lodged a protest. Was he acting on the orders of the Korean court?" Then an official from the Border Defense Council, which investigated Ahn Yong-bok, suggested the following response: "The Korean imperial family, the government of Korea, has nothing to do with what one ignorant person blown by the winds may say." In a letter to So Yoshizane, the lord of Tsushima Domain, Korea equated Ahn Yong-bok's complaint to Japan to a crime of forging a letter and conveyed that Ahn had been exiled in accordance with the law. In other words, the Korean state repudiated what Ahn Yong-bok had done. In addition to Ahn's statements lacking credibility, Korea as a state repudiated his statements and actions. Therefore, they cannot be used as evidence for the claim to sovereignty over Takeshima. The Korean portrayal of Ahn Yong-bok as a hero is a complete fabrication. It is a facade that falls apart with only a little investigation into the facts.